What terrain should I focus on when I'm hunting elk? That sounds like a simple question, but it's one of the fastest ways elk hunters get themselves into trouble because the real answer isn't just benches or saddles, it isn't just drainages or dark timber, and it isn't just big glassable basins or meadows. Elk don't live somewhere just because a feature has a name. They live where terrain solves a problem for them. It helps them feed, bed, stay cool, use the wind, avoid pressure, move efficiently, and escape when something feels wrong. So if you want to find better elk country, stop asking what feature looks good to you and start asking what that terrain is actually doing for the elk. That's the filter that changes everything when we talk about terrain. A bench by itself doesn't mean much. Neither does a saddle. A drainage by itself doesn't mean much. But when those features start connecting feed, bedding, water, and you stack wind and thermals, security cover, and escape routes, now you're looking at something worth your time. That's where a lot of hunters get stuck, though. They find one good looking feature on a map and treat it like a destination. They hike to it, they hunt it, and maybe they sit there too long and wonder why nothing's happening. But the better question is what's connected to it? Where's the feed? Where's the bedding? Where's the closest water? How does the wind move through it? How would elk get in and out without exposing themselves? And what happens when hunters start pushing from the obvious access points? Stop hunting terrain features like isolated spots and start hunting terrain relationships. Elk country isn't one mark on the map, it's a system. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years. I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I've spent many of my former years as an elite athlete, and all of that hunting and life experience has brought me to the point where I want to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter. Now, the first terrain feature I'd take seriously is a bench, but only when it makes sense inside the bigger system. Elk are really big animals, right? And they don't want to spend all day bedded on a steep pitch or slope if they don't have to. A bench gives them a flatter place to bed, chew their cud, stay in cover, catch wind, and leave fast if they need to. But don't just look for the giant obvious benches everybody else can see on a map. Some of the best benches I know of are small, broken, timbered shelves that don't look like much until you're actually standing in them and then seeing the bed's tracks, poop, and hair. I especially like mid-slope and upper half benches when they're tied to north and northeast facing timber, nearby feed, and some kind of escape route. A good bedding bench gives out comfort and security, but here's the key. Don't crash right into it, right? Hunt the movement to it or from it. A bedding bench is only valuable if you can hunt it without blowing it up. Saddles are another feature that gets talked about a lot, and for good reason, but saddles aren't magic. A saddle matters when it helps elk move from one important place to another. It might connect two drainages. It might let elk cross from feed to bedding without climbing over the highest part of the ridge. It might give them a quiet escape route when pressure comes from below. It might connect north-facing bedding cover to south-facing feed. But a saddle that doesn't connect anything important is just a low spot on a ridge, right? In thick timber, a saddle can be one of the few places where movement becomes somewhat predictable because you can't see far and elk don't have to show themselves. In open basin country, saddles help you predict where elk are going to leave after feeding or where they're going to cross when pressure hits. Don't just sit every saddle. Look for trails, tracks, rubs, droppings, or terrain that naturally funnels movement. A saddle only matters when elk have a reason to cross there. Drainages are where a lot of hunters either find elk or waste an entire day because they treat the bottom like the hunt. Drainages matter because they organize a lot of elk needs. Water often lives there. Green feed often follows moisture. Trails develop around them. Wallows, seeps, and crossings can show up in them. But the best elk use isn't always in the bottom. In fact, a drainage bottom can be noisy, brushy, swirly, and easy to blow out. A lot of times, the better spots are on the sides, little benches, finger ridges, steep pockets, hidden openings, timber edges, and shelves above the bottom where elk can bed with security and still drop into feed or water nearby. So don't just march the creek, right? Look at the whole drainage as a framework. Ask where those elk would feed, where they'd climb to bed, where the thermals would help or hurt them, and where they could leave if pressured. The drainage is just part of the system, right? The elk spot is usually hidden inside it. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the Elk Hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the Elk Hunting E-book Series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. In thick timber, the mistake is thinking all dark cover is good elk cover, but a lot of times it isn't. Big blocks of timber can look perfect from a distance and still be dead if there's no feed, no water, no bedding structure, and no reason for elk to be there. What I'm looking for in timber is variation, maybe aspen pockets or little parks, deadfall edges, young growth, seep lines, north-facing shades, small benches, rub lines, trails with direction, fresh poop, beds tucked where elk can use the wind and cover together. In timber, sign becomes more important because you can't glass your way through the problem, but you still can't just wander slowly all day either. Move with purpose until the sign tells you to slow down. Once the sign gets fresh, the whole hunt changes. Now your wind checker's out, your feet get quiet, you slow way down, your eyes stay ahead of you. You're not just hunting the timber, you're hunting the specific part of the timber that gives elk what they need: feed, shade, wind, security, and a way out. Now, in glassable basin country, the advantage is pretty obvious. You can use your eyes before you have to use your legs. But the trap is also obvious. Hunters glass the big, pretty opening, spot elk, and then make a bad move because they haven't read the terrain around those elk. Open country doesn't remove the need to understand terrain and elk behavior. It just gives you more information, a lot of times easier information. If elk are feeding in a basin at daylight, the question isn't only, can I get to them? The question is, where are they going next? So I like to watch the edges, the timber fingers, the shade lines, the avalanche chutes, the brush pockets, the little benches above feed, saddles behind the basin, hidden exits that let elk leave without standing in the open for too long. Glassing finds elk, but terrain tells you what those elk are about to do. If you only chase the dot, you're usually late. If you understand the route, you can get ahead of the decision instead of reacting to it. The other piece you can't ignore here is pressure, because pressure changes the terrain map. Elk might use the clean, obvious, easy to understand country when they're undisturbed. But once hunters start showing up, security becomes a lot more valuable. That doesn't always mean elk go 10 miles deep either. Sometimes they can, but sometimes they don't. And the distance from the road matters, but it's not a lazy mileage rule. Some elk are closer than hunters think because the terrain hides them, or the access is awkward, or everybody walks past them trying to go deeper. Other elk are far because pressure keeps pushing them there and they just keep getting bumped. So ask a better question here. Where would elk go if every hunter entered from the trailhead, road, meadow, ridge, or main drainage? Maybe that's backside pockets, or ugly timber, or side hill benches. Maybe overlooked drainages and hard to hunt corners can become better than the obvious basin. Pressure doesn't just move elk deeper, a lot of times it just moves elk where hunters make mistakes. So when you're deciding what terrain to focus on, I want you to start thinking layers. Start with the obvious elk terrain like the benches, the saddles, the drainages, north facing timber, water pockets, feed to bed transitions, timber edges, finger ridges, and glassable basins. But don't stop there. Ask what those features connect. Ask how elk would use them at daylight, midday, and evening. Ask what the wind is doing there. Ask what the thermals are doing. And ask how elk would escape. Also ask where hunter pressure comes from. That's how you separate country that only looks good from country that actually hunts good. The goal isn't to find just one feature. The goal is to find the relationship between features that creates a huntable elk system. So, what terrain should you focus on? Focus on the terrain that solves the most problems for elk while giving you a realistic way to actually hunt it. If you're in thick timber, look for hidden structure inside the cover. If you're in open basins, use your glass to find elk and then the terrain to predict their next move. If pressure's high, quit worshiping the obvious country and you've got to start looking for where hunters are making mistakes or where they don't want to go, right? Elk terrain isn't about what looks good on a map. It's about feed, bedding, water, wind, escape, security, and pressure all coming together in one huntable system. You've got to connect those dots. Now, if this episode made you realize you need a better elk plan this season, don't just watch another video and hope it all comes together. Build your plan now. If you want to study the full system on your own, start with my Elk Hunting series of ebooks. If you want daily guidance, accountability, and a place to ask questions as season gets closer, join me on Team Backbone. If you want my eyes on your actual hunt plan, your maps, access, terrain, pressure points, wind, thermals, and strategy, book an Elk Hunt Plan Audit, and I'll get you tightened up before season. If the missing piece is your body, your legs, your lungs, or your ability to handle mountain miles and a heavy pack, check out my Backbone Unlimited training plans. And if nutrition is where you need more structure, getting leaner, fueling long days, or building a better in-season food plan, check out my nutrition plans. The hunters who are ready in September are the ones who start tightening their plan right now. So go to backboneunlimited.com, choose the path that fits where you are now, and I'll help you get started. Thanks for being here. I appreciate every one of you. I'll see you in the comments. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.